My name is Claire Whitaker. I'm 34 years old, and this year my fifth wedding anniversary turned into something I never saw coming. You know how you think you know someone, how you build a life with them brick by brick, memories, routines, holidays, those little inside jokes. And then one night in your own home with people you invited, you realize they've been making decisions that don't include you at all. That was me. Standing in our living room, glass of champagne in hand, surrounded by friends and family, waiting for the toast I thought we'd planned together. Instead, I heard my husband say the one sentence that changed everything. "Double celebration tonight," Ryan said, beaming. "My mom's moving in with us next month." And just like that, the room changed. The air got thinner. People clapped, some awkwardly, some genuinely, while I stood, frozen smile plastered on my face, feeling like I was being swallowed whole. Before I can continue my story, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. I love seeing how far these stories reach. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. See, Ryan and I live in Asheville, North Carolina. It's the kind of place with artisan bakeries and hiking trails just 20 minutes apart. Our house is a craftsman-style home on a quiet street lined with dogwoods and porches, strung with twinkling lights. On the surface, we looked like the perfect couple. We even had matching raincoats. But behind that curated veneer, behind our homemade pizza nights and shared Spotify playlists, was a tension that had been simmering for years. One I kept suppressing, believing that love meant compromise, that being the understanding wife was my role. Diane, Ryan's mother, was standing near the fireplace that night, dressed like she was about to meet the Mayor beige suit pearls, that smug half-smile she wore whenever she thought she'd won. When he said she was moving in, she turned to me and said, "You'll adjust. I always do." Then she actually winked. My ears were ringing, my hands shaking. The only thing keeping me upright was the weight of the folder in my purse, the gift I had planned to give Ryan after dinner. My surprise. Only now it wasn't a gift, it was a fuse. Because 3 months before that night, I overheard something I wasn't supposed to. Something that made me realize I'd been living in someone else's house, metaphorically, emotionally, this entire time. I started making plans then. Quiet ones, careful ones. Plans I hoped I'd never have to use. But Ryan had just made our private fracture public. So I stepped forward, tapped my glass, and said, "Since tonight is full of surprises, I have one too." And just like that, the party ended before the cake was ever cut. It's strange the way hindsight sharpens everything. How once you see the full shape of something, its pattern, its weight, you realize it was never subtle. It was always there. You just didn't want to see it. When I first met Diane Whitaker, she smelled like lavender soap and wore the kind of smile that made you feel chosen. We'd only been dating 6 months when Ryan took me to meet her. She greeted me with a hug and a casserole, asked me about my work as an architectural designer, and complimented my blazer twice. I remember thinking, wow, she's warm, the kind of woman who made a home feel lived in. What I missed then was the way she touched Ryan's sleeve every time she spoke. The way her eyes flicked toward him, as if checking whether I passed some test she hadn't mentioned. "Ryan's always had excellent taste," she said that night, placing her hand lightly on his arm. "He used to bring me flowers every Sunday after church." So thoughtful. I smiled, but something about the statement tugged at me. That word "used to," as if I had displaced her. That was the first time I saw it, though I wouldn't name it. Until much later, Diane didn't want to welcome me into her son's life. She wanted to absorb me, or failing that, to remain the central woman in his world. The signs escalated slowly. After our engagement, Diane began dropping by with things leftover pie, unsolicited cleaning products, framed photos of Ryan as a child. I was raised to be polite, so I'd pour her tea and endure the 2-hour visits, where she rearranged our bookshelves because Ryan likes his spines in order. I didn't correct her. I just let her do it then, undid it after she left. Back then, I still believed the issue was mine, that I just hadn't earned her trust yet, that if I tried harder, she'd soften. I brought her flowers on her birthday, invited her to our housewarming, laughed at her passive-aggressive jokes. "Claire's not much of a cook," she told Ryan once right in front of me, "but she's good at ordering takeout. That's a skill too." I laughed with them, But I started using paper plates the next night just to avoid seeing her scrub one of our pans again, like it hadn't been cleaned properly. The mask slipped more each time she visited. The warm smile stayed, but the tone sharpened. Her compliments turned into thinly veiled judgments. I just love that you prioritize your work, Claire. Not every woman wants to worry about making a house a home. Ryan rarely noticed. Or if he did, he chose not to. She's just used to being involved, he'd say, after I tried gently, always gently, to point out how her visits made me feel. It's hard for her since Dad died. You know how close we've always been. I nodded. I always nodded. But inside, a quiet resentment was building. Not just toward Diane, but toward Ryan. Because loving someone shouldn't mean turning away every time they look at you and say, "Please help me feel safe in my own life." I started to question whether he ever really saw it. Whether he ever really saw me. The first time I truly felt like a ghost in my own house, it was over furniture. I had come home early from a client meeting, feeling victorious, after securing a green light on a sustainable housing project my firm had been chasing for months. The sun was still pouring through our living room windows when I stepped through the front door and paused. Everything had been moved. The couch once centered in front of the fireplace was now pushed against the far wall. The reading chair we picked out together during a weekend trip to Charleston had been rotated 90 degrees to face the back porch. The bookshelf had been completely rearranged, color-coded. Even the rug had been flipped around. I stood there stunned as Diane emerged from the kitchen holding a tray of lemon bars. "Surprise," she chirped, brushing her hands on a dish towel. "Ryan said he was fine with it. I just thought the flow was a bit off in here." "This feels more open, don't you think?" I swallowed hard. "Diane, did you use our spare key?" She looked puzzled for half a second. "Of course Ryan gave it to me after the last storm just in case. I figured I'd stop by while you were both at work." I remember nodding. I remember forcing a smile. I remember the lemon bar she handed me, crumbly lemon sweet and hard to chew around the bitterness in my mouth. That night, Ryan said she just wanted to help. "Mom gets bored since retiring. She always loved decorating when I was a kid. She rearranged our home, Ryan." Without asking, he rubbed the back of his neck like a teenager caught in something careless. "We can move it all back if you want." I didn't want to move it back. I wanted him to understand why it mattered. Why coming home to a reconfigured life I didn't authorize felt like a violation. But I couldn't find the words sharp enough to break through his lifelong immunity to her interference. So I said nothing, and that became the pattern. Diane helped with the laundry refolding Ryan's shirts, because he prefers them this way. She critiqued my spice cabinet, told me Ryan liked garlic powder over fresh cloves, and once replaced our guest bathroom towels with embroidered ones from her own house. "These are more dignified," she said. "Yours felt a little college dorm." Each time, I felt my world shrink just a little. Like my identity was a collection of Post-it notes being slowly peeled off the walls one by one. The rooms I had once designed with love and intention no longer felt like mine. My voice in that space, my autonomy was dissolving. And Ryan? He didn't fight it. He barely noticed. Every now and then he'd say, "Mom means well," or "Just let it go, it's not worth the fight." But it was worth the fight. It just didn't feel like one I could win. I stopped inviting people over. I stopped tweaking the decor. I started tiptoeing emotionally around his guilt, around her expectations, around the growing ache in my own chest. That was the day I began quietly researching locks. Not to keep anyone out. To remind myself what it felt like to have a door no one else could open without permission. I used to think compromise was the key to a good marriage. That if you just stayed flexible, just let the little things go, you'd eventually meet each other in the middle. But what happens when only one person keeps bending? I began to notice the imbalance in small, almost laughable ways at first. If I cooked dinner, Diane would drop by the next day with a casserole just in case Claire's busy. If I bought new bed sheets, she'd send over ones she thought were more Ryan's style. If I suggested we host Thanksgiving, she'd immediately call everyone and offer her place instead. "It's easier," she'd say. "Claire already does so much at work." I didn't argue. I never wanted to be the angry wife who couldn't get along with her mother-in-law. But the truth was, Diane wasn't interested in coexisting. She wanted dominance, and she got it not through force, but through assumption. She expected inserted replaced, and Ryan let her. Every time I tried to set a boundary, I became the problem. Like the time I asked Ryan to give me a heads up before Diane came over. Just so I can plan, I'd said gently. He promised he would. The very next week, I came home to find her on our patio trimming my lavender bushes. She texted while I was at work, Ryan explained. Didn't think it was a big deal. It was always like that. Diane would override a decision, and Ryan would wave it off with some version of, she's trying. Let it go. She's lonely. Lonely became her excuse for everything. Once I asked him why he didn't stand up for me when she critiqued my cooking in front of his cousins. She was just being old school, he said. Don't take it so personally. But it was personal. Every dig about my work schedule, every suggestion that I wasn't a real homemaker, every time she made Ryan her mouthpiece, instead of speaking to me directly, it added up. It wasn't just about the home or the chores. It was about ownership, about who Ryan's real partner was in his eyes. I started to wonder if I was the plus one to their relationship. The hardest part, Ryan wasn't cruel. He wasn't malicious. He was kind, thoughtful when it came to everyone else. He left sweet notes in my lunch. He remembered my project deadlines. He rubbed my back when I couldn't sleep. But when it came to his mother, he couldn't say no. He couldn't even say, wait. He'd been raised to orbit her, and I had been trying in vain to build a separate gravity, so I stopped asking him to intervene. I stopped hoping he'd draw the line. I started building an internal ledger every time I bit my tongue, every time I bent, every time I smiled when I wanted to scream. Because if the house couldn't hold me, I needed to find somewhere that could. Not someday, not when it gets better. The day everything crystallized, I wasn't even trying to eavesdrop. It was a Saturday afternoon, warm and bright, the kind of Carolina spring day that makes you believe in renewal. Ryan and I were hosting one of Diane's extended family brunches, her idea, of course. We'd cleaned the house, top to bottom, prepped a frittata fruit salad mimosas. She brought her famous blueberry muffins and took credit for the entire spread. I slipped away after clearing the plates, headed to the kitchen to grab the dessert dishes. That's when I heard her voice just outside the window. She was on the back porch with her sister, unaware I was only a few feet away, separated by glass and screen. I'm worried about Ryan, she was saying, her voice just loud enough to be caught by the breeze. Claire works too much. The house is always cluttered. They eat takeout like college kids. It's not how I raised him. I froze, one hand still on the cabinet door. She's not exactly maternal, Diane added, lowering her voice just slightly. She keeps saying someday about kids. But you know how career women are. Always postponing. Ryan won't say anything, he's too loyal. But I can see he's tired. There was a pause, then her next words came like a hammer blow. I've been thinking it might be best if I sold my place and moved in with them. It's just too much for him trying to keep up with everything. I could help. Create the kind of home environment he deserves. Her sister must have said something skeptical, because Diane's next line came sharp, and sure, Ryan will convince her. He always does. I backed away from the counter, numb. Not angry, not yet. Just stunned. Because I suddenly understood that all the microaggressions, all the unsolicited help, the casseroles, the decor, changes, the critiques, none of it had been accidental. Diane had been laying groundwork, preparing a future that didn't involve my consent. One where she resumed the role she believed was rightfully hers. Matriarch, homemaker, decision-maker. And she was right about one thing: Ryan would probably try to convince me. Gently, of course. With concerned eyes and logic that felt reasonable at first. He'd say she needed us, that it would only be temporary, that it was the best solution for everyone. But it wasn't just the plan that broke me. It was the quiet confidence in her voice. The way she spoke like I was an inconvenience she'd work around. Like her son's wife was a logistical issue, something to absorb or outlast. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay next to Ryan, watching his chest rise and fall, wondering how much he knew. How much he had already agreed to. How many conversations had taken place without me present, without me even considered. And that was when I made my decision. I would not be part of a plan I didn't design. I would not live in a house where my presence was constantly negotiated. So the next morning I called in sick for the first time in years, and I started looking for something of my own. I found it on a Tuesday. The listing popped up late at night while I was scrolling Zillow on my phone, sleepless again, curled on the edge of our bed, while Ryan snored beside me. A 2-bedroom craftsman cottage in Weaverville, 20 minutes north, quiet green tucked beneath a canopy of oaks. The photos weren't impressive. The exterior was faded, the floors creaked, but there was something about it. It looked unclaimed. I visited the property alone that weekend, told Ryan I had an off-site client consult, walked through the empty rooms with a clipboard and a racing heart. It had chipped baseboards and an outdated kitchen, but the bones were good. The light was generous. I could see it, my vision layered over every flaw. The kitchen with a wide farmhouse sink and butcher block counters. A reading nook tucked by the window where sunlight pooled in the afternoons. A small home office for quiet design work and a porch swing where I could drink coffee without commentary. It felt like possibility. Not a place to run to, but a place to return to myself. I made an offer that night. Used my year-end bonuses tucked away in a separate savings account. Money I'd originally saved for a future vacation home or someday nursery. It wasn't easy draining that account, but it was necessary. My marriage was beginning to feel like a structure built on a crumbling foundation, and I didn't know if it could be repaired. So I built a backup. The offer was accepted within the week. I didn't tell anyone. Not Jenna, my best friend. Not my boss. Certainly not Ryan. This wasn't about drama. It wasn't about showing him. It was about preparing myself for whatever came next. Having a space where I wouldn't need to ask permission, where my decisions didn't have to be filtered through someone else's expectations. I hired a small team of contractors and told Ryan I was taking on a new side project. It wasn't entirely a lie. I did manage design specs, just not for work. Every few nights, while Ryan coached baseball or met friends for drinks, I'd drive out to Weaverville. I picked paint swatches, laid tile samples across the floor, sketched built-in shelving designs late into the night. It became my ritual. The drive, the hammering, the solitude. I'd come home smelling like sawdust and wildflowers, tired, but centered in a way I hadn't felt in years. Each room I touched became a reclaiming. I wasn't just designing a house, I was rebuilding my sense of self. Some nights I cried on the porch swing, not because I regretted what I was doing, but because I did not know if my marriage would survive it. I loved Ryan. I loved the boyish way he loved his students, his crooked half-smile, the way he warmed my feet under the covers. But I didn't love what we'd become. I didn't love being edited out of my own story. That cottage became my resistance, my declaration. If they wouldn't give me space, I would carve it for myself. And as our 5th anniversary approached, I tucked the deed and keys into a folder, along with a letter I wrote by hand, one that started with, "This is not an ending." But I had no idea just how much would end before I ever got to read it aloud. You can plan every word in your head down to the cadence and breath, but when the moment actually arrives, it never lands quite the way you rehearsed. Our 5th anniversary party was supposed to be a love letter in motion. 30 people, string lights, soft jazz playing through the patio speakers. I had framed photos of us through the years, ski trips, beach days, lazy Sunday mornings, with mugs too large for the counter. I catered his favorite barbecue from that place in Hendersonville and made sure the cake was double chocolate, just how he liked it. It was going to be a celebration of who we'd been, and a gentle nudge toward who we still could become. And for a while it was. Everyone smiled, toasted, said we were couple goals. I played hostess beaming like I hadn't spent the last 3 months building a contingency life behind his back. Then Ryan raised his glass. He pulled me to his side and said all the right things about my strength, my support, my laugh. I held on to every word, feeling the warmth of it rise in my chest. And just when I thought he was about to toast to the next 5 years, he said, "There's more. We've got another announcement. My mom's moving in with us next month." There it was, the trapdoor, and I fell through it in front of everyone we knew. The room responded before I could. Clapping confused laughter, Diane practically glowing in the corner like she'd won a long campaign. I turned to Ryan, searching his face for a sign, a hint that this was a joke, or at the very least a conversation we'd had. But he was proud, so proud. I couldn't feel my legs. Then came the squeeze on my waist, the stage smile, the obligatory "Samantha's been so supportive, haven't you, honey?" I nodded. Because what else was I supposed to do, disintegrate? The only sound louder than the blood rushing in my ears was Diane's voice beside me. "Isn't this just perfect?" she cooed. "Now I can help out while Claire focuses on her work schedule. Lord knows she'll need it once grandchildren come into the picture." The condescension wasn't even hidden anymore. She was already measuring curtains in her mind. That's when I reached for my purse. I hadn't intended to do it then, but something in me snapped. If he was going to turn our marriage into a stage play, then I had a right to deliver my line. I tapped my champagne flute with the side of my fork until the room quieted. "Thank you for being here tonight," I said. "And thank you, Ryan, for your surprise announcement. Since we're all sharing life updates, I have one too." I pulled out the cream folder. For the past 4 months, I've been working on a project of my own. I bought and renovated a cottage just outside Weaverville. It's mine. The deed, the design, the keys, it's all mine. I opened the folder and held up the photo. A charming green door, a tiny porch swing, flower boxes spilling over with color. A home, just not our home. Ryan stared at the image like he couldn't quite process it. "You bought a house without telling me?" he asked, stunned. "Yes," I said, steady now. "Just like you arranged for your mother to move in without telling me." The silence that followed was deafening. I left that night with my head high and my stomach in knots. The party dissolved within minutes of my announcement. People mumbled excuses, collected coats, avoided eye contact. Diane stood frozen in place, mouth tight, like someone had stolen her thunder. Ryan looked like I'd slapped him in front of the entire state of North Carolina. Maybe in a way I had, but I didn't apologize. I picked up the overnight bag I had packed that morning, yes, morning. Call it intuition, call it preparation. And I walked out of our house without a backward glance. My car ride to the cottage was quiet. No music, just the rhythmic sound of tires over asphalt and my own breath, shallow but steady. I reached the driveway just before midnight. The porch light cast a gentle glow over the garden beds I'd planted weeks earlier. Tulips beginning to open, life growing despite the chill. I unlocked the front door, stepped inside, and for the first time in months, maybe years, I exhaled. The space welcomed me, like it knew I belonged. The walls were soft white, the hardwoods newly sanded and warm under my feet. My books lined the shelves in the order I preferred, by genre then title. No one had touched them but me. I dropped my bag in the bedroom, kicked off my heels, and curled up on the window seat in the living room, looking out at the moonlit yard. It was so quiet. No TV in the background, no sports commentary, no clinking of dishes being reloaded into the dishwasher correctly. Just the stillness of a space untouched by someone else's preferences. My phone buzzed relentlessly on the side table. Ryan, Jenna, even Angela, his sister. Texts, missed calls, voice messages. But I couldn't read or listen to a single one. I wasn't ready to explain myself. Not yet. Because I wasn't sure anyone would understand what had really happened. It wasn't just about Diane moving in. It was about the years that came before the thousands of little moments where I swallowed my needs and called it compromise. The rooms that were reshaped without asking. The weekends we canceled our plans because his mom really needed him. The jokes at my expense. The invisible bruises. This cottage wasn't about escape. It was about return. To myself, to my voice, to the part of me that once knew how to take up space without apology. I slept that night in my own bed alone, in a house I had built with intention and care. The sheets were new, the silence sacred. I didn't cry, not because I wasn't sad, I was, but because the grief had already passed through me weeks ago when I first realized I might have to choose myself if no one else would. By morning, the sun spilled through the windows and caught the dust motes dancing in the air. I brewed coffee in silence, barefoot on cool tile. My phone buzzed again. Still Ryan, and I knew eventually I'd have to answer. But not yet. Today, I would water my plants. I would reorganize my office. I would sit on my porch swing and feel the breeze on my face. Because solitude wasn't loneliness. Not when you were finally listening to yourself. I didn't know what would happen next. But for the first time in a long time, that uncertainty didn't scare me. He came 3 nights later. I heard the gravel crunching under tires before I saw the headlights swing across the living room. I didn't move from the kitchen table, where I was sketching renovation options for a client, just kept my pencil in hand, pretending my heart wasn't kicking against my ribs like it wanted out. I knew he'd come eventually. I just didn't expect him to use the key. I had included a copy in the original plan, tied with a ribbon inside the folder I handed him at the party. Back then, the cottage was meant to be our shared sanctuary, a gift, a space for reconnection. But now it felt like the line in the sand. The door opened softly, He stepped in, eyes sweeping the space like it was a museum he wasn't sure he had permission to walk through. He looked tired, older, not in a worn-out way, but like someone who'd been forced to look at himself under harsh lighting. "Claire," he said, voice low. "Ryan?" He stood awkwardly by the door, then slowly moved farther inside, gaze drifting to the built-in shelves, the window seat, the soft throw over the back of the couch. "This place is beautiful," he said after a beat. "Thanks." I didn't offer him coffee. I didn't rise. "You did all this yourself." I nodded. "Designed it. Oversaw the renovation. Picked every nail, every tile. It's the first space I've created just for me in a long, long time." He stepped toward the kitchen island, ran his fingers lightly over the butcher block countertop. "It feels like you. Clean, intentional, like it breathes." I swallowed hard. "I didn't come to fight," he added quickly. I needed to see it, needed to understand." I leaned back in my chair watching him. "Did you understand me the night of the party?" He flinched. "No, not really. I was angry, embarrassed, confused. And now," he met my eyes. "Now I'm ashamed. Because I realized I didn't just miss the signs. I ignored them. Every time you tried to tell me what was happening, I brushed you off. I told myself you were exaggerating, that you'd come around. You thought I'd adjust," I said flatly. "Just like your mother did." He looked away, then back again. "Yeah, I did. Because you always have." I nodded, until I didn't. We sat in silence, not hostile, just heavy. "Claire?" "I miss you," he said softly. "But I get that missing you isn't enough. I came here to listen, not to win." That admission cracked something open in me. So I told him about how I'd felt erased, about the constant rearranging of our home, our plans, my identity, about how every helpful suggestion from Diane felt like a quiet erasure of who I was, and how every time he didn't speak up, it felt like consent. He didn't argue, he just nodded, eyes glossy. "I saw her rearranging our bedroom," he admitted. "The night you left. She was clearing space for her vanity like it was already hers. And suddenly, I saw it all. All the things you've been trying to tell me. It was like someone pulled the cotton out of my ears." I looked at him, not with pity, not even with hope, just curiosity, to see if this man in front of me could really become someone new. "I want to try," he said, "if you'll let me." I didn't say yes, but I didn't say no either. I just said trying starts with action. 3 months later, I stood in the doorway of the house we used to share, now partially stripped of the silent assumptions that once filled it. Ryan met me at the threshold, a box in one hand, paint samples in the other. "I was thinking maybe your office could go here," he said, pointing toward what used to be the guest room. "It gets the best light. And we never really have overnight guests." I smiled, stepping inside, slow and careful. Not because I didn't trust him, but because I was still learning to trust this, the version of us we were slowly building boundary by boundary, like a structure built not on nostalgia, but intention. A week after our talk at the cottage, Ryan began therapy. Not couples counseling, his own therapy. He said he wanted to understand why his default response was to defer, to placate, to fold in on himself. "It's not just about my mom," he admitted. "It's about how I learned to love without ever challenging." We did begin marriage counseling too. Dr. Levon, recommended by my therapist, was sharp, direct, and utterly intolerant of martyr narratives. She told us early on, this isn't about blame, it's about power, respect, and clarity. It was harder than I expected. Some days I left sessions more exhausted than hopeful. Other days I saw flashes of the man I married, and the one I needed him to become. Diane didn't go quietly, of course. She tried everything. Tears, guilt, sudden health concerns that flared up every time Ryan reinforced a new boundary. But the breaking point came when she arrived at our house with a moving truck 3 weeks early and started unpacking in the driveway. Ryan told her no, and this time he didn't just say it, he meant it. He gave her 3 listings for nearby senior living communities, explained that we'd be happy to help her move, help her settle in, but she would not be living with us. She accused him of betrayal, of abandoning her, and for the first time in his life, he didn't fold. "I'm not choosing Claire over you," he told her. "I'm choosing us. There's a difference." When he told me what he'd said, I cried. Not out of joy, not even relief, but because I finally felt seen. Like someone had opened a window and let the air back into my lungs. We didn't rush things. I kept the cottage. Still do. It's no longer my exit strategy. It's my sanctuary. A reminder that I can love someone deeply and still preserve space for myself. Sometimes I work there. Sometimes I stay the weekend alone. Sometimes we both go and just exist outside the noise. We still see Diane, but the visits are planned, time-limited, respectful, because that's what boundaries do. They don't shut people out. They let the right things in. Tonight, as I sit beside Ryan at our kitchen table, his hand lightly resting over mine, a floor plan between us, I realize we're no longer trying to go back. We're going forward, with eyes open, with fewer apologies, and with the understanding that love, real love, is not about absorbing someone else's weight. It's about holding your own and still choosing to reach for theirs. I didn't know if our marriage would survive that night, but standing up for myself didn't break it. It saved it. Because sometimes love doesn't mean bending until you disappear. Sometimes it means stopping the spin long enough to find your center. Have you ever had to set a boundary with someone you love? A moment where you realized silence wasn't keeping the peace. It was costing you yourself. If my story resonated with you, I'd love to hear yours in the comments. You never know who needs to read what you have to say. And if this gave you something validation, courage, or even just company, go ahead and like the video, subscribe, or share it with someone who needs to hear they're not alone. Because the truth is, you're not. You are not crazy for needing space. You are not wrong for wanting respect. And you are not selfish for choosing yourself.